News of the godlike strangers on their four-legged animals is taken by royal messenger to the emperor of the Incas, who's camped in the valley of Cajamarca in northern Peru, guarded by an army of 80,000 men. Atahaulpa is revered as a living god, a son of the sun itself. He's in Cajamarca on a religious retreat, giving thanks for a series of recent military triumphs. When he hears about the progress of the Spaniards, he chooses not to have them killed. Instead, he sends back a message. He invites them to join him in Cajamarca as quickly as possible.
Atahaulpa wanted the Spaniards to come to Cajamarca and enter into a trap. And to be sure that they would do so, he played like a psychological game with them, sending presents, asking them to come. Atahaulpa knew that the Spaniards were not gods. The intelligence reports speak of people wearing wool on their faces, like a llama, like an alpaca, that is, like an animal. Then they went from one place to the other, wearing on top of their heads a little pot that has never been used for cooking. You need to be crazy to walk with a pot. But you must be beyond salvation if you arrive to a camp and you don't use that pot to cook. Atahaulpa had an idea that these were subhumans. What could a few horsemen and 100 and so Spaniards do to the powerful Inca? Virtually nothing.
But Atahaulpa's spies don't realize that the Spanish are armed with some of the best weapons in the world. At the time of the conquistadors, Spain had the biggest army in Europe, orchestrated from the imperial capital, Toledo. For more than 700 years, the Spaniards had been at war, fighting against the Moors and other European armies. There was an arms race in Europe. To survive, the Spaniards needed to keep up with the latest in weapons technology.
Hey!
By the 1530s, the harquebus was an important part of the Spanish arsenal. Gunpowder had originally come from China, but its use as a weapon was pioneered by the Arabs. In European hands, guns became lighter and more portable, and were used for the first time by foot soldiers on the battlefield. The harquebus was still a crude weapon, but would go on to change the face of warfare.
To us, moderns, this gun doesn't seem useful for anything. It's like a joke. Its aim is terrible. It takes a long time to reload, and while the shooter's reloading, an swordsman would come in and kill him. But the Incas hadn't even gotten this far, and even this gun, with its sound and with the smell and with the smoke and with every now and then a person that it manages to kill, would have been terrifying to someone who had never seen this before. This would have been shock and awe, 1532 style.
For all its bluster, the technology of gunpowder was still in its infancy. The real power of the conquistadors lay elsewhere. with the production of steel. Toledo had some of the best swordsmiths in the world. But why were people here able to craft deadly steel weapons, while the Incas were still making simple bronze tools?
There was nothing innately brilliant about Europeans themselves that allowed them to be the ones to make high-quality swords. Just as with guns, swords were the result of a long process of trial and error that began outside Europe. People started working with metal in the Fertile Crescent 7,000 years ago. And because Europe was geographically close to the Fertile Crescent, Europeans inherited this metal technology. But they took this technology on to a new level. European soldiers demanded stronger, longer, sharper swords. This is what a Toledo sword looks like when it's finished. This particular one is modeled on the sword that Pizarro carried. It's a fearsome weapon. It's used for stabbing, and it's also used for slashing, and I can easily understand how the person wielding the sword could kill dozens of people within a short time.
Swords like this, rapiers, represented a high point in a very sophisticated metalworking technology. You think about what the qualities are that are needed in a sword. First of all, it has to be hard enough, the metal has to be hard enough to take a sharp edge. And that requires steel. That is iron infused with carbon. And the more carbon you put into the iron, then the harder the metal is. But if you make it too hard, then it's brittle. And that's no good because as you hit somebody, your sword would break. And so you also need your sword to have a certain pliability, an ability to bend and spring back into shape. And it's got, by heating it to certain temperatures, plunging it into cold water, immense amount of experimentation. It took centuries to get to the level of sophistication where you could get something so long and elegant and fine and deadly as the rapier.
The rapier, with its extra-long blade, was developed as a dueling weapon, but became so fashionable in Renaissance Europe, it was the sword of choice for any aspiring gentleman.
The word rapier derives from the Spanish term espada ropera, and that means dress sword. And for the first time in Spain, we start to see people wearing the sword with their everyday clothing, their civilian dress, going about their everyday business. They didn't do that in the Middle Ages. This is something new in the 16th century. And it's saying, I have arrived, I am a gentleman, I am upwardly mobile, and I claim ancestry from the knights of the Middle Ages. It was very much a symbol of the conquistadors' aspiring greed. The thing that drove them through all their hardships, the thing that made them go to the Americas, was their lust for gold, their lust for self-advancement. And the rapier absolutely symbolized that overbearing avarice.
On November 15th, 1532, Pizarro's band of adventurers enters the valley of Cajamarca. They've been told that Atahaulpa is waiting for them here, but they're not prepared for the sight that greets them. In the hills beyond the town of Cajamarca is the Imperial Inca army, 80,000 men in full battle order. The conquistadors' own journals bear witness to their first impressions.
Their camp looked like a very beautiful city. We'd seen nothing like it in the Indies until then, and it scared us, because we were so few and so deep in this land.
Pizarro sends a party of his best horsemen into the heart of the Inca camp. They are led by Captain de Soto. They are gambling that Atahaulpa will allow them to pass through the camp unharmed, and agree to meet them.
Soto's visit had a very important psychological purpose: to intimidate the Inca in front of his people, challenging him with the horse. Atahaulpa at first didn't react to Soto's presence, as if nobody had entered the room. Once the horse comes eye to eye with the Inca is still calm, showing that the horse has no impact on him, calling Soto's bluff.
The captain advanced so close that the horse's nostrils disturbed the fringe on the Inca's forehead. But the Inca never moved.
And then, after a brief silence, comes Atahaulpa's explosion. He was telling them, the time has come for you to pay. I understand this as the time has come for you to pay with your lives. Soto, I understand, was nervous enough to come back with fear to the camp, and as we know, the Spaniards spent the night before in extreme fear.